And so they began to look at imposing sanctions. They created MDC to take power, but when NDC lost its elections in 2000, then we saw the United States imposing ZIDERA sanctions in 2001. They imposed these sanctions to stop land reform and to try and force the Zimbabwean people to elect another president in the presidential elections of 2002. 2002, Robert Mugabe would ask EU observers to leave because of their favoritism. Immediately, the EU imposed sanctions. After those sanctions, Robert Mugabe won the 2002 presidential elections, and immediately the United States imposed what was called a national emergency upon Zimbabwe, saying that it is a threat to the national security interests, economic interests, and foreign policy interests of the United States. This was immediately followed by sanctions that were called Executive Orders 13288, and then these were amended and increased again in 2005 as EO 13391, and then amended again by a black president, Barack Obama, into EO 13469 that put the government of Zimbabwe as a threat to the United States government. They immediately deployed a weapon called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to cripple Zimbabwe further by attacking its economic engine. This then gives me a chance to explain these sanctions a bit more in detail. ZIDERA is US, EU, Canada, and Australia using their directors in multilateral lending institutions to deny Zimbabwe reconstruction and development loans that were promised at Lancaster House Conference, by the way, and over and above that, blocking the cancellation of those colonial debts we spoke about. The executive order sanctions target the economy and the engine of Zimbabwe to ensure that Zimbabwe cannot develop and use its land. So no US company, financial institution, companies of US partner nations, or any other companies from any other nation that wants to do business with the United States and the EU can make payments, clear payments, or hold accounts, give loans, invest or fund, trade, transfer technology, software, machinery, or give assistance. This is humanitarian assistance or NGO aid or other assistance like lobbying to Zimbabwe without a license from the US president. These sanctions are upon the Zimbabwean government, its ministries, companies owned by the Zimbabwean government by more than 51%, politicians, and 144 special designated nationals, and anyone who does business with them. This basically is the entire country of Zimbabwe that is under sanctions. And what it is that the United States says is, you are either with us or against us. And they put diplomatic pressure on other nations that are not in Europe to also impose the sanctions they've imposed or face penalties or secondary sanctions. What is the problem that these sanctions cause? They cause an economic war, a war that stops us from being able to participate in fair and free international trade. They block our ability to get payments. They block our ability to get technology and machinery to upgrade our country and our system of industry. They isolate the nation, diplomatic relations, business relations, investment. They incapacitate our industry because we can't retool. They break what we call partner bank relationships or linkages with other banks. They cause dependency so that we depend on NGOs and aid. They cause these people who give us aid to then influence us and to instill a psychological warfare with lies and sentiments that are negative, so that we have an attitude and behavior that causes us to begin to fight one another, that fragments and divides our nation and causes us to have a civil war, civil disobedience that puts people against the government so that there can be a foreign government intervention. Now, how much have we lost because of these sanctions? It is very difficult to quantify, but let me just show you what we call the GDP parity comparison. We were almost twice as big as Zambia in 2001 when the sanctions started. But today, Zambia is bigger than us. And when you look at that, we have lost up to $26.6 billion because of these sanctions just in our GDP. There are multiplier effects to that. And what we need to now start be concerning ourselves with is that since 1979, when the National Emergency Act was created, 86% of all 34 executive order sanctions that come with the national emergency on third world countries have turned into wars or civil wars. Zimbabwe has 3 national emergencies and executive orders that have been imposed on it.